can give you a tutorial now, or
well, just this one.
Anita here. Oh, good. Anita.
No, she's not here.
She is. Goody. I turn it over to you.
Well, we have now. I was gonna say only have, but we have 12 people. Do we want to wait for more people to come, or we want to jump right in?
We should just jump right in.
And jumping. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the kickoff orientation meeting for the 24-25 Superintendent's Budget Advisory Committee. I am Anikia Ford-Marthel, the proud superintendent of Berkeley Unified, and so happy to see familiar faces and also some names that I recognize. And welcome to those of you who are new to the SBAC. Again, this is an introductory meeting because we know that there are several committees that are still getting their membership settled, and there will likely be new faces when we have our next meeting, but we did not want to wait. We wanted to keep the agreement we made in the spring, which is to kick off this important work around resource allocation as soon as possible. So with that, I'm going to ask Ms. Vivian to please share the PowerPoint. And we are going to go through a couple of logistics, then we're going to do public comments, and then we're going to get to rocking and rolling with the business. Hi, Vicki. Hi, Steve. Hi, Jesse. Hi, Rita. So again, this is the Superintendent's Budget Advisory Committee, or SBAC. This again is kind of a welcome orientation or informational meeting. So again, for those committees that have not yet identified their SBAC representative, it is okay. Not only will this be posted to our website for your future reference, but again, it's mostly going to be review and a refresher. I come to you bringing greetings. Next 2 slides, please, Ms. Vivian. On behalf of our Board of Education, that is our President, Anna Vasudev, our Vice President, Khadijah Brown, and of course, our 3 other directors, Mike Chang, Laura Babbitt, and Jennifer Shanaski. We really appreciate your coming and spending your time and giving your passion and energy to this very important work, making recommendations that ultimately inform decisions on the district's budget that our board approves and gives input on. I'm going to ask you, Ms. Vivian, to put it in presentation mode, and then we're going to go to our next slide.
Give me a second. It's not giving me the option. Hold on.
And it's fine. We'll keep going if it's not in presentation mode. I just want to make sure the slide is showing them what we want to see. And if not, I can share screen if I need to. While Ms. Vivian is getting it together, I want to remind you all that we are on Google Meet this year as an outcome of one of the recommendations made by this committee and a decision approved by our board to save some dollars by using Google Meet and not paying the cost that we have for Zoom. So we still have Zoom for our board meetings and use it. We have one account that we can use for board meetings and then for the occasional webinar, but we will be together in SBAC on Google Meet for the duration of the year. And so if you are not familiar with Google Meet, get ready. They've actually updated the features a lot, so that it has some, it's improved since we've all used it last. Ms. Vivian, do you want me to share a screen? Would that help?
I'm sorry?
She's going to share her screen.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop presenting.
Okay.
And I did make you co-host, so you should be able to.
Oh no, you can see. Oh, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes right now. Oh my goodness. They can see the answer to the quiz. I'm gonna go crazy now. The teacher in me is really going mad.
See, she has.
Everyone should have had their eyes closed for that particular part.
I'm driving, so I decided not to close my eyes, if that's okay.
Okay.
but I'm also not looking at a screen.
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you for being here. And I'm glad that you did not close your eyes. I did not want to be responsible. Okay, I'm just setting it up, friends, so that I can present to you. Rocking and rolling. Okay, so there's those folks I just told you about, our amazing Board of Education, who again takes the recommendations that you all make as an SBAC very seriously and uses it to inform its final decisions and votes around the district's budget. want to remind you that we are in a Google Meet, and therefore we want to make sure that everyone is familiar with the expectations as we engage virtually. We do ask that for all of the voting members of SBAC, you keep your screens on if at all possible, not if you're driving, Natasha. We also ask that you rename yourselves to reflect not just your name, but also the group or advisory committee that you represent. As we get further along in our work together, we will do a number of discussions, and there's also voting that takes place here. So we ask that only those who are voting representatives of the Superintendent's Budget Advisory Committee engage in those discussions. There is a time in the agenda, and we will get there shortly, where the public can make comments and give feedback, et cetera, during the public comment time. But outside of that, once public comment time has been closed, we do ask that the chat is solely used by those who are voting members to engage in the discussions. And we ask the voting members to only use the chat to engage in discussions at hand at that moment. Similarly, only those who are members of SBAC can vote. And so again, when there's time for voting, we'll make sure you know that, but we do ask that folks and the public please respect the process and the rules and not engage in voting or making comments throughout once public comments is done. Whew. We have a lot of work to do, y'all, which is why we agreed in the spring to meet earlier this fall. And this is our first meeting in October. We will have several meetings after this. We want to first check in and make sure that everyone remembers and introduce to folks who are new to the committee what the purpose of this committee is. As the Superintendent's Budget Advisory Committee, you really are serving in the advisory capacity to help me, to help the team, to make some really important decisions and engage in some really important conversations that ultimately leads to recommendations for what I submit to the board as our final budget. As members of the SBAC, your primary roles are to review the budget with me, with us, with team, to study items as appropriate, to ask lots of questions. In the case of this year, where we're going to have another round of budget balancing acts, to really push and ask those questions that gets us to making the best decisions for our students with regard to resource allocation. Where needed and appropriate, you will write written recommendations to me to inform the recommendations or the final budget that I propose to our Board of Education. In the world of virtual engagement, we record all of our meetings. There is also a time in our budget, in our board meeting, where the different committees can make 5 minutes worth of comments. And so at least for the last 2 years, there hasn't been a need for members of the SBAC to write anything up. Again, everything is documented in our meetings and in our notes and on our website, and we keep our board abreast. And then that's a Superintendent Budget Advisory comment section of the board meeting where statements are made there. So if that changes, I will let you know. But otherwise, typically, with this should read as not written recommendations, but just recommendations. And then occasionally, we will ask that you make presentations to the board, or as a committee, you might decide that you want to use that 5-minute time at the start of the board meeting just to update the board and then the general public on the work that we've been doing as an advisory committee together. I'm seeing names and I'm seeing committees come up in the chat. And even though those committees represent different priorities sometimes, different frameworks and different plans and different focal populations, we know that we come together in community around a shared mission. And that mission is to enable and inspire our diverse student body to achieve academic excellence and make positive contributions to the world. And so regardless of what committee you're representing, you come into this space representing all babies of BUSD and committed to making that mission real and true and ensuring that our students have access to excellence, equity, enrichment, and engagement every single day. Today's agenda, again, is an overview, information, and orientation. And so we will pause very briefly to do a roll call. We will also pause for public comments, and then we're going to jump into the work, which is really going to be about reviewing the work that this committee did. Not all the work, there was a lot of work done, and we appreciate you for that. We're reviewing the decisions of this body from last year, and then also sharing some new information that we have about the state of our budget this year. And so though we're not going to be showing new targets, or we're not going to start doing the work of making decisions and reviewing and analyzing, we are going to make sure that all of us have the necessary information to be at the same start point, if you will, to then engage in decisions around budget balancing in the future meetings. Hi, Dan. And then we're going to do some closing moves and some next steps. So with that, I'm going to pause. I'm going to allow Ms. Vivian to do roll call. And then right after roll call, Ms. Vivian, you can go into public comments, and we'll decide how long public comments are based on how many folks are in the room with their hands up. Ms. Vivian?
Thank you. So Rita Smith, PTA President, PTA Treasurer, PTA Secretary, Vicki Davis, Nicole Chabot.
Here.
Thank you, Nicole. Jessica Lynn Brandy.
I'm sorry, this is Rita Smith at PTA Council. I'm here.
Yeah.
Couldn't figure out how to unmute.
We should do a lesson. Oh gosh.
Natasha
I promise
Sandiford.
sorry. I promise the next meeting, the slide will be updated to show you all the different function features of the Google Meet, because you're right. It's I apologize.
Natasha Sandiford.
Yes.
Kathleen Marta. Hilda Valencia. Ozy. Nor Aguilar. Dan Lindheim.
I'm here. I don't know how to change my name.
I don't think you can.
Next next
Yeah, we'll
meeting,
look at that.
Dan. You guys,
Okay.
I got the Zoom slide.
I was trying to be compliant, that's all.
Thanks, Dan.
Jenny Morgan. Emily Nathan. Rebecca.
No,
Robinson.
I think you missed me because you're doing it alphabetically. So this is
I
Rebecca.
just called your name, so
Oh,
I
you
have
did?
it.
Okay, good.
Yes,
Yeah,
I just
thank
did. Natasha's here. Beatrice.
Here.
Mildred.
Here.
Sean.
Here.
Yazid.
Here.
Frank.
Here.
Matt.
Here.
Regina.
Regina's not here today.
Lisa.
Hi, I'm here.
Steve Collins.
Here.
Renee Molina.
Here.
And then staff. Kathy Fleming.
Present.
Jill.
I'm here.
Pauline. Nikia. Trish. Samantha.
Here.
Debbie Dean. And Emily.
Here.
Okay, that's roll call. Anyone have public comment? Can you say yay or nay? Because I can't see everyone's hand. No public comment? Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Vivian.
You're welcome.
Okay, before we get started again, we have some returnees. Is that a word? And then we have some new folks here to SBAC. So we're going to do a quick check for understanding. You're going to use the chat to answer. You're going to put the number for your answer, 1, 2, 3, or 4. SBAC focuses on and makes recommendations on which BUSD funds. 1, BSEP funds. 2, general funds. 3, state and federal categorical funds, or 4, all of the above. Go ahead and put your answer into the chat. Which funds does this group have purview over? I got 4, I got a 2, I got a 2, another 2.
Where's chat?
2, 2, 2. The chat is the little, where is
On
it?
the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you, at the very right, you see a little quote box. It's right next, it's to the left of the triangle square.
Got it.
icon.
Thank you.
So I have some 2s. I have a 4, and then I had a person that's like, not 4, 2, and then nope, it's 4, another 4. Then I have 2 and 2 and 2. It's lots of 2s. So the answer is 2. This group this body makes recommendations and really has purview. I see you, Dan, around the unrestricted general funds. I saw that Dan was shaking his head. I saw that I just forgot who said it. Then Nicole was like, it was a 4. Shoot, I guess it's 2. No, overall it's really 4. And then Natasha said 2 with the understanding of context of 1, 3, and 4. And so for those of you who said 4, I'll give you partial credit. And that even though, the main focus of this group is the unrestricted general funds, what we know is that in order to make informed recommendations, we do have to have an understanding of the other buckets of the other funding sources for the district, inclusive of our state and federal categorical funds, which have restrictions or sometimes are one-time dollars, inclusive of our BSEP funds, which contributes over 20% of our district's overall budget. And so yes, we will be really engaging in and looking at primarily our unrestricted general funds, but it is not unheard of that you have questions or that we sometimes share with you information about these other funding sources to inform the recommendations that you make about the general fund. I will also let you know that we understand that, it's sometimes hard to talk about a slice of the budget pie without understanding the entirety of the pie. And so we are trying to find ways to not overwhelm you by giving you all the information about all the district funds, but to make sure that you do understand and recognize how those other funding sources are working in service of the work that we're trying to do together. So partial credit if you gave number 4, Dan, but the real answer is 2. And again, as we go along together these next several months, please know that you can always ask us questions about those other funding sources, and we will get you those responses to help you engage appropriately. And we're going to keep on moving. Again, last year we had to have some pretty hard conversations. We were able to collectively make around $7.2 million in budget reductions or budget balancing decisions. Some of those dollars were one-time dollars, and some of those dollars were ongoing. Our target and our goal was to make $7.2 million in ongoing reductions. And so we will be looking at where we were only able to identify one-time reductions and already are going into this year, recognizing that we have to address that. And then also we will be coming back with a new target of what reductions need to be made this year. Those of you all who are new and who are worried and who want to just make no reductions, please know that we were really thoughtful last year to not do this willy-nilly, that we really tried to set out some strategies that would inform the budget reductions, and those strategies are listed here. They're not in any specific order for the most part, but we definitely said and continue to say that we were really trying to make sure that very last rectangle, consolidation and reduction of positions and programming, was the last thing that we do. And so last year we spent most of our time in those other 6 strategies. And then we had some conversations around that 7th one, consolidation and reduction of positions and program. But we will definitely have to have more of those discussions as we do the work this year. When we ended last year in the spring, we wanted to make sure that we were clear that it was to be continued. And so it's really nice to have some familiar faces this year, to have some folks who were a part of the work last year, but it's also really nice to have some new ideas and some fresh faces and some fresh perspectives. We are still in the process of confirming the membership for this year. So again, you will see some more folks added at our next meeting. We agreed that we will resume early. We actually said November, December, but we decided to resume even earlier than that. So we're here today in October. We said this year we're going to really implement those budget reduction strategies that we saw on the previous slide. We did it already. We're going to have to do it some more. And so we're going to really have to understand what each of them is and what each of those mean and how they will be informing our decisions. And so we really want to be early about making sure we understand the reduction strategies, but also early in understanding the target. So we don't have that for you today, but we will have it at a subsequent one of the next couple of meetings to really start making sure we're moving towards that target. We also said we're going to do a better job of getting on the same page around our metrics for our programs. If we're going to have to make decisions about consolidation or reduction of programs, we want to make sure those decisions are informed with data. And so we want to be able to see like how many students are participating in the program, or what is the impact in terms of, academic outcomes, or reducing, disciplinary issues, et cetera. And so we will be bringing back to you more metrics and more examples of us monitoring the implementation of the programs that we've been doing. And then we're also going to make sure that we're stopping and doing some data dips for the programs currently this year. So we'll give you some past metrics, but also along the way, we're going to be saying, and how is that program or those programs doing this year? Those are just a couple of things that you all said you wanted to focus on for 24-25. So I wanted to remind you of that and wanted to recommit and let you know that we will definitely be doing those last two for sure, really looking at metrics more this year together as an SBAC and really progress monitoring, because we know that's going to be critical as we make decisions. One more quick check for understanding. This is Dan's time to shine. What % of BUSD's budget is allocated to staffing and personnel? Go ahead and use the chat. What % of BUSD's budget do you think is allocated to staffing and personnel? 80, 80, 80. You guys cheated. I forgot. Stop. Just stop. There's no point even doing this. This is not, you should have been honest, and you should have said, Inikia, we're not going to answer that question because we saw the slide. Thank you, Dan. Dan said 80 plus. The answer is 80 plus. Thank you, Dan. I didn't have a plus on that slide when y'all cheated. It's 80 plus. And so the reason why I think it's important for us, you can stop answering, guys. Stop it. No one gets points.
Natasha says BSEP is 8 plus, but what did
no one's getting points. So 80% plus is the real answer. And the reason why that's important is because, again, we talked about those budget reduction strategies, and we were able to do 7.2 million in reductions last year, really, really not having to grapple with consolidating and reducing existing positions and existing programs. We did a lot around the evaluating and removing vacant positions and redundancies. And so that helped us a lot. But I want to just be really honest and transparent with us as a committee and as a team, that because over 80% of our resources go to staffing and personnel, as we engage in budget reductions this year, and as we look at that very bottom rectangle, we are going to have some conversations around what programs are we keeping. And oftentimes people and personnel are attached to programs. And so that will be a part of the conversation, as well as in general, what positions are we able to keep and sustain, and which ones might we have to consolidate or reduce. And so we're not having that conversation now, but I just thought it was only fair to let you know that in case you want to run and you're like, I don't want to be a part of those decisions or those recommendations, so get me off the committee now. It's real, and we're going to be engaged in some really hard conversations across our time together this year. That said, I am happy that we have something to kind of ground us, so that we're kind of at least have some parameters around which we're making those decisions. And those are our core values of resource allocation that you see here on the screen. Those of you like Vivian and Natasha and Dan and Matt, you guys know them by heart. In fact, I could remove this slide and you could recite each one and the definition, but I won't do that. What I am going to ask you all to do, though, is I want you to look at each of them. There's equity, transparency, excellence, engagement, sustainability, and stability. And you're going to use the chat one last time before you get to be with Pauline and Emily and do nothing but numbers. And you're going to think to yourself, pick one of these resource allocation values. We're going to do a quick activity called value add. I think that was so cool, you guys, like a value add, like value, core value, and add, because we're talking about money. Anyway, so here's how this is going to work. You're going to pick a core value for resource allocation. I'm going to put it back on the screen in a minute. And then you're going to add with the plus symbol. How can the SBAC ensure that we realize that value as we engage in conversations and make recommendations on resource allocation? So here's the example. I picked the value of excellence. And that means that we engage in continuous improvement and reflect on our decisions, and we progress monitor to understand the impact of what we're doing. And so the value add for me is excellence plus. How we're going to do that is we should look at various data to inform decisions and not just make decisions by our feelings or by our preferences. So similarly, I want you to do the same thing. I want you to pick a core value of resource allocation. You're going to add a plus sign, and then after the plus sign, you're supposed to put, like, how do you think we can ensure that we do that? What do we need to do as an SBAC to make that core value real? So here are the values. We're going to take 2 minutes to do it. Put your value, put the plus sign, and put your how. Got our first one, sustainability. We have to recognize that whenever we use one-time funds or shifting funds, for example, from BSEP, we aren't just kicking the can. We are just kicking the can down the road, or we aren't, Miss Natasha.
Make sure we're not.
Make sure we're not. Vicki has another one. Vicki's resonating with sustainability as well. Look at how we will be able to fund programs in an ongoing way. Ms. Beatriz is all about equity today. Survey our students. Oh, do they have access to the resources? Transparency is a big one. Matt says we should provide accurate data in a timely manner. Uh-oh, that's a good one, Matt. In a timely manner, let's make sure we're all on the same page. Keep them coming. I'm not going to read all of them, but we are going to reflect on all of them as a team, as a part of kind of like a feedback, and we'll be thinking about how we can make these things real as we engage in this work and have these hard conversations. And so appreciate you for your thoughtfulness. And if you find another value that really stands out to you that you want to add a how to, feel free to do that as well. What I'm going to do now is to pass the mic to our amazing fiscal team. That's Pauline Philansby, who's our Assistant Soup of Business Services, and Emily Mayer, who I met last year, who's our Executive Director of Business Services. And they are going to walk us through the recap, if you will, of the budget cycle, as well as the work this team did last year, and then finally what our unaudited actuals showed us the fall of this year. Pauline?
Hi again, everybody. Welcome to a really early start this year. Usually we would start this process in January, but as Anika stated, we're actually starting it in October because we have a lot of work to do. So this just talks about the budget cycle. We're focusing on the 25-26 year. And I think I updated all the boxes to kind of move them forward a year. But what's going to start our whole process is the governor's proposal for 25-26. We're going to be using those assumptions as our first cast for the 25-26 budget. And of course, through February and June, the board will be, actually it's going to be more than that, but the board will be receiving updates as and budget reductions for 25-26. So we will be straddling 2 years. We're in 24-25, and then we're working on 25-26. The other important event in 25 is that, and I think I have October to May, we're going to be doing our budget development. In March, we're going to be looking at the second interim, and that's going to be the 24-25 second interim. So how does the prior year impact the year that we're going to be budgeting for? It's all about our ending balance and learning about our actual expenditures and how it influences the upcoming year. In May, we have the governor's May revise, and that's the last information we would have to actually build our 25-26 budget. Oh, Lisa is still responding. Thanks, Lisa. We will go to the board in June with the final budget and LCAP for 25-26. But remember, that will be based on the governor's May revise, because the governor's final budget comes out after we present our budget to the board. So in that case, if there are significant changes in the governor's final budget, we would do what's called a 45-day revise within 45 days. And it's not a full reporting, it's probably just on a spreadsheet. So we have to kind of monitor what the governor's assumptions are, what he's saying in his May revise, and then the final budget. Next slide. Yazid has left. So putting it all together. So last year we had a target of $7.1 million target. Our first tranche, our budget balancing solutions, and we have a link to that further in our presentation. We came up with $6.9 million. In an ideal world, all of that would be ongoing. But you can see 4.7 was ongoing and 2.2 was one time. So what does that mean? We've actually kicked the can down the road for the 2.2 because it was just a one-time solution. But we got to the 6.9 in the first tranche. And then on the next slide, you can see that we took other suggestions to the board. We did the garden and cooking program, one-time savings of 0.2. Then we had staffing school sites based on the formula, and we removed the freezing the bus drivers for 1 more year from consideration. So that gave us another 0.4. And again, the combination was 0.2 ongoing and 0.2 one time. And on the next slide, it kind of puts it all together. So we had 4.9 ongoing, 2.4 one time. So the amount that we were over was 0.2, but because we had one time and ongoing, we're still left with that 2.2 problem that we now have to address in this year. And the next slide then we look at the board vote in terms of what they came up with the final recommendations, and they approved, and this is pretty small, but they approved the staffing formula and the garden and cooking. And I think we also froze a position on the next slide. We froze a position, and it says frozen for, it's actually an ongoing reductions, but we also froze one of our management positions that was being vacated. And that slide kind of like pulls all the numbers together, where you can see that the original target, less what we came up with, and less what we proposed, and then what the board proposed as well. So any questions on that? And we have the link to the 6.9, and we have the past slide decks that we can actually take a look at. Hi, Mildred.
Hello, thank you for letting me back in. I appreciate you.
You can just come in and go. It's not like Zoom where we have to let you in. Actually, I think Zoom, you were okay. Anyway, so that's the overview. In terms of our estimate and what we're actually doing, we're pretty much on track in terms of our projections. Some came in a little higher, some came in a little lower. But Emily is going to take you through how we actually close the books. And remember, this informs the ending balance for this year, which is the beginning balance for the upcoming year. So, Emily, you can take it away.
All right. So thank you, Pauline. So like Pauline said, this is talking about our unaudited actuals. So this is our look back at how did things actually end. We've been sharing sort of projections of what that would look like throughout last year with our first interim report, our second interim report, and then the unaudited actuals are when, after the year is over, we look back and say, what actually did we land on? So if we go to the next slide, what we like to focus on is a variance report. So we're always comparing what are the numbers, like our most up-to-date numbers compared to what was it that we showed you the last time. And so our variance report is going to focus on the difference between our estimated actuals, so what we had been budgeting is planning to spend for all of 23-24, versus what our actual unaudited actuals are. And we call it unaudited because this is before the auditors have done their final audit, which will happen in December. So this is data that goes to our auditors and they do a final overall review. But this basically means the pretty nearly final numbers that we're working with going forward. So if we go to the next slide. I think that we may need to refresh the deck. Can I take over share screen?
You need to.
All right.
Is there any way you can make the slide larger? Oh, I see you're doing it right now. Thank you.
So this is the variance report. So this is our comparison of where we landed versus last time we had done our projections. And this is focusing on the unrestricted general fund. So like Superintendent Ford-Marthel had said, we focus here in SBAC on the unrestricted general fund. So not looking at all of our other pieces of funding, like our state and federal funding or our parcel taxes. This is just really zeroing in on that unrestricted general fund. So overall, I'd say we were fairly close to what we had been projecting. Our revenues did come in higher, close to $1 million higher, and that was primarily driven by our lottery revenue exceeding the budgeted amount due to some prior year revenue we had, as well as some of our local revenues increasing with lease and interest and recouping short payments on parent fees. When we look down at our expenditures, we see things going in the opposite direction of our total expenditures ending about $1.2 million higher than what we had been estimating. That was primarily driven by our certificated and classified salaries exceeding the budget, and that was due to a combination of substitute costs and vacation payouts, as well as other factors. And that was offset partially by underspending in our supplies and contracts and telephone costs. And then you'll see that bottom line, the direct support / indirect costs. So from our grants, we take an indirect cost rate to help offset the cost of sort of running the district. Those came in about $750,000 less than what we had budgeted. And that's because we had planned underspending in some of those restricted block grants that were spending out over multiple years. So you'll see that overall the delta between our revenue and expenditures was about $280,000. And if we go to the next slide, please.
You're doing the slides now, Emily.
Oh, sorry. If I will turn to the next slide now. Sorry, it is about 95 degrees in my office.
Steve, go ahead.
All right, so when we look at our other financing sources and uses, overall our contributions from our unrestricted general fund increased, and that was because as part of closing the books, what we do is we transfer the unrestricted general fund's share of our 3% reserve. We have to maintain a 3% reserve as part of California rules. We shift that out to our special reserve fund in Fund 17. So it's just moving it from our overall unrestricted general fund into that reserve account. We see in number G that the Fund 20 did make about $400,000 of contributions, and that's to offset bond subsidy funds not yet received. And our BSEP contribution increased due to higher spending on teacher salaries and benefits, including substitutes. So our salaries and benefits expenditures did come in higher than projected, but what that meant on the flip side is also that the BSEP contribution, which is indexed to our spend on teacher salaries and benefits, also increased. And then finally, our contribution to special education increased due to increasing costs. And some of that was from our contribution to the unrestricted general fund, and we also leveraged one-time restricted grants as well to help offset that cost increase. All right, and so then when we look at where we landed at the end of the year, we have closed with an undesignated ending fund balance of $1.672 million, and that's about $200,000 higher than what we had initially been projecting. But that overall, I would say we are, the story has not changed drastically from what we were sharing in our last updates around the state of the budget. And I will turn that back over to Colleen.
So we want to pause there just to see again if there's any questions. Okay, I see Nicole's hand. I think this works where everybody, where if you raise your hand, it makes a little ding. So the only ding I heard says Nicole Chabot has raised her hand. Please, if anyone else has raised their hand, let us know. Nicole, go ahead.
I think this whole Google Meet thing is so funny. I'm about to run a sales meeting for more than 100 people and all dialing from different places. And we always do Google Meets. So I swear we'll get on board. Good. Anyway, so those variances aren't super surprising, because I imagine with a budget this large, that percentage variance, I imagine that happens every year probably. I guess the one thing that I'm still, and I don't know if you're gonna be able to answer this question now because I'm still trying to get my head around from last year, is that I'm wondering specifically like the overages in salaries, it was like 2 point something and change. Is that on track with previous years? Because what I'm trying to understand is last year, one of the big savings that we tried to achieve was we closed positions that had been vacant for multiple years. So I'm just not sure how you can see a savings in 1 year when a position's been empty for multiple years. So why would we see savings in 1 year and not have seen savings in the prior years, if that makes sense?
So Nicole, I can try to address that. So when we close the books, there are sometimes surprises at the end of the year. We're finding that a lot of employees hold their timesheets and hold their submittals for additional compensation until the end of the year. So we might have been on track up to May, but then in June, we have a flood of actuals. People are using this as their savings account. So they're actually, we were surprised at some of the additional charges that we saw. But as Emily explained, a lot of that had to do with our substitutes. And that's where the timesheets come in. And also other timesheet costs came in significantly higher. But I think what this is doing is actually informing us that we have to do a reset on our budget, because we should always use the past actual performance to inform our budget. So Matt will tell you that traditionally there's underspending in the supplies and the contracts. And again, that is decentralized. We give people, they tell us how much they need, we fund their accounts. And then at the end of the year, it's like, oh, well, we didn't need the full PO loaded, or, you know, we meet with them like in May, but by then it doesn't help us kind of change the budget. So I think this year, what we're doing is looking at our budget closer, probably reducing the supplies and the contracts, and increasing salaries, because the trend has been, we have been increasing costs for subs, and how that is going to also increase our budget. Probably we need to look at the contribution from BSEP as well, because traditionally that has been, you know, the subs have come in at an expected level, but with the increase, we're going to have to do a reset, I think, on our projections. We kind of landed okay, because the overall change was less than 100 when you just look at the change in the fund balance. So we didn't have any great savings or any great aha moments to kind of help our ending fund balance, because we're very close to what we projected. So, but we have to redistribute, I think, the way that we're actually balancing in the unrestricted general fund. So it was a clean close, but it also informs our budget for 24, 25.
So you have Vicki Davis.
Vicki?
Yeah, I have some follow-up questions to Nicole's question and that response. One thing I'm observing is, especially if that's related to subs, part of our decision making last year, including site subs, was based on those estimates. But if we ended up spending a lot more on subs than we were expected to, then maybe that's something we want to revisit, because if we have site subs that can cover a lot of those things, that's a known expense. And then my second question is there an HR system or something in Brea where we can track what those sub hours are and then budget for them, even if the timesheets haven't been received? And then my third question is related to, there was a mention of vacation payouts. And my understanding is that vacation money is set aside in a different account because you pay it as it goes through on the salary. So at BUSD, is that vacation money not set aside in a separate account? And are we including that in our general fund until it's requested?
So we can, there are several questions. So
yeah.
We can talk about Sam May weigh in on the subs. I can weigh in on the vacation payouts. And I didn't write them down. What was the third question?
Well, it was site subs, and then also if there's a system that tracks sub hours separate from the timesheets, but as the requests are coming in, so we can track and budget the hours as they're used versus waiting for the timesheets. And then the third one is related to the vacation payouts.
So for the site subs, site subs are not paid on timesheet. Site subs are paid as a salary, so they would show up as that would be a known cost. So
Right. Well, but last year we decided to remove site subs because we thought our sub cost would be less without site subs. But now that our sub cost was so much more than we expected, maybe that wasn't the best decision. And maybe we should relook at that. That's for future meetings and discussions. I'm just observing if there was a $2 million variance and a lot of it's related to subs, then maybe that's something we should relook at. So that was more of a comment.
Oh, okay.
That part of it anyways.
So in terms of tracking sub hours and all of that, yes, we can. We haven't done that, but we can use our subsystem to help us track for our certificated subs. It doesn't, it wouldn't tell us for the sort of unexpected subs or subs that come up in the classified world. But we could use the information that we have in our subsystem to give us an estimate of the cost for our certificated subs. And then we did greatly reduce our site subs, and so we are hoping that we will see a positive impact from that, but it is something for us to continue the discussion on and continue to look at.
Okay, and then for vacation, the previous system that we had, QSS, we did not track vacation payouts separately. So it kind of got all morphed into our salary and benefits. It's certificated and classified. It's something that's difficult to project because we don't know when people are leaving or when they have to have a payout. Some union groups have a vacation payout at the end of every year, but that's a very small fraction. What this vacation payout that was higher than budgeted were people leaving and people that had like significant balances. And when you're saying that vacation balances are tracked in a separate fund, they're not. They're reported in the audited financial statements because it's a liability. It only becomes an expense when we pay it out. So do we want to set aside an allocation for vacation payout? We can, but we would need more information and a deeper study to determine, what would that number be? Because you're really trying to project who will be leaving and who has vacation balances. But to that end, Anika, you want to kind of mention what we're doing with vacation balances, us kind of tracking them, and
bro, keep going.
Hey,
keep going. You're doing great. Isn't she doing great?
But so we are. This is something that has come up with us in cabinet and our managers, and we're focusing on vacation balances and encouraging staff to actually take their vacations and to bring to management's attention our exposure by tracking and looking at everybody's vacation balances. So this is an area that we will be focusing on, and that needs additional work.
You all see how she tried to get me to answer the question, and she totally knew the answer. I think just to piggyback off of what Pauline just said, and looking at the question that Rebecca has in the chat, can we do something to get those timesheets in earlier? Talking about the sub timesheets or the additional pay timesheets, and is it subs not submitting or something in BUSD that slows it down? Back to that idea of continuous improvement. We're always kind of asking ourselves the questions to try to understand where blocks and gaps and barriers are. I would say at this point, we've identified some gaps in our own BUSD systems, one of which Pauline just spoke about, how we're making sure that we're actually tracking vacation appropriately, making sure that if someone says they're going to take it, they actually take it and we deduct it, but also making sure we encourage our teams to actually use their vacations because it's a huge expense otherwise, to the point that she was just making. Similarly, with timesheets, we are really going to try to get folks into the habit of, not letting them stack up or, not saving them until next month, but getting them in a timely manner. And so there's some internal things that we're trying to do as a system to help us be more efficient so that we can track these things and, get ahead of these things and not wait to the end of the year and say, what? We owe Nicole, she just submitted, 500 hours worth of additional time. So we'll be updating you all on that as well. But those are really good questions. And I think that just, again, echoes the idea of continuous improvement, always trying to be curious and inquire and figure out what it is and try something to fix it and then see if it worked or not. The other hand I saw up was Miss Natasha.
Thank you. So I think, Ms. Pauline, you touched on this a moment ago, but in talking again about the substitutes and the BSEP contribution, my recollection, and it's been a few years now since I've had my hands on a teacher template directly, but that really hadn't changed in a while. If memory serves, it was around 1900 per FTE, something like that. And are you in conversation with Director Fleming looking at whether that, I'm not sure whether the increase in the sub-cost to BUSD is, I'm assuming it's a combination of the cost per hour, per day, of a substitute, or is it that there are simply more people being out and needing substitutes? What's going on that's driving that? So 2 questions. Are you in conversation with Director Fleming, and then what's driving the increased cost?
I'm always in conversation with Director Fleming. We talk every week. We have a BLT meeting. So it's an interesting point. It's something that came to our attention when we put in the parameters for the teacher template, and we had left in the all the parameters and then also track the substitute costs. And the thinking was at one point that to run a classroom, the sub cost would be, we use like the middle rate and so many days. But when we looked at the actuals, so that would be our budget. But when we looked at the actuals, it was off the chart. So I think we have to rebench that, because the reality is when we're closing the books, we're seeing that the huge difference is in that cost. And then obviously we have a few differences, in terms of the number of teachers as well. But their analyst obviously is on our team, and we have a lot of discussions ahead of time. And when we're closing the books, we worked closely with Kathy and shared our information with her.
The other thing that I would want to share is that last school year until December, we had COVID leave where people were forced to take 5 days off of work. And so, which the average person, it was more like 3 days, but that also increased the amount of people who were absent and the amount of time people were out that we needed subs. So that pushed us also to have more of a sub budget than we normally would have because of that. And that went away again in December last year. So we're hopeful that because we no longer have the mandatory leave for that, and other things are going on in the world, that we're going to see a reduction in the use of substitutes as well.
I'm looking at the screen. I'm also looking at the chat. Folks who are not comfortable or are not able to unmute and ask a question or raise their hand, please know that you can use the chat to ask a question, and we will recognize that question and read it aloud. I do see that Vicky has some follow-up questions. So does Rebecca about the sub and vacay time. Rebecca was saying, don't we want folks to use up their vacation and not have it roll over? And the answer is in most cases, yes. And that's why one of the kind of change actions we're doing is to really make sure that the supervisors and managers are encouraging folks to take the vacation and creating a culture where that is okay. I'll tell you that when we met with a group of district leaders and we were like, hey, you guys take your vacation. People were like, well, how, when? Because the reality of it is both the district level, but also for our teachers and other folks, like you miss a day and all that stuff feels like it's there waiting for you. And so, it's a little bit of a mindset thing as well as a cultural thing. We want to make sure that folks know that we care about them as people and humans first, and that they need that time to breathe and step away. And also make sure it's realistic, right, and practical, because you can say that all you want, but if folks take 2 days off and 3 days off and come back to a mountain of work and overwhelm, it pretty much makes the little bit of breathe and exhale that you had like null and void. So working on a number of things around that, but we completely agree around folks' mental and emotional well-being. And then Vicki asked about caps. Does it cap out? And there are some differences depending on if folks are represented, unrepresented, and what labor union. So we can definitely follow up and get that information to you all as well. That's really in the weed detail, but I think it might be helpful for you to understand why folks are letting those vacations accrue in some groups and then others are not. In case it isn't clear, Matt Meyer says, certificated staff does not have vacation time, and that is true. And that's why I said there's some nuances that vary between labor unions and represented and unrepresented, and so we can share that with you all at a later date. Frank's hand is up. Hi, Frank.
Hey, hello, everyone. I just have a clarifying question, I guess. I'm not sure when you say subs, are you talking teacher subs, classified subs, or in that group, are you also putting in agencies, contractors?
We're talking about predominantly certificated subs, which is where I think that's where we saw the increase. And for the teacher template, that would be certificated subs.
Thank you.
Looking one more time to see if there's any hands up for any questions or comments, and also just doing one more check of the chat, and also noticing that it's 5:01.
No one's hands up. No new questions in chat.
Okie dokie. And so our last thing that we want to have folks do is just to think about not just what we shared over the last hour, but also reflect on, remember the work that we did last year as a committee, and also the fact that we know that we have some big work to do ahead. We again are very appreciative of the ways in which this team came together to do that work. And we're really proud to be able to, go with recommendations for some pretty significant reductions that maybe weren't really felt. I mean, I would say that I talked to a lot of folks in the community and even some BUSD staff who were like, "Oh, we made that much cuts," and folks are, in some ways saying that's kind of unbelievable because, when you hear the number 7.2 or 6.9, right, it's a huge number. And the reality is that folks really haven't felt it. Right. And I'm saying that in speaking very in general terms. There's some departments and teams who really felt those reductions, and there's others who haven't. Again, as we move into the conversations for 24-25, it's going to be really hard for us to make the reductions that are ahead without more folks feeling it, without us as a system feeling it, without us having to make some really hard decisions around what we're going to do and what we might have to stop doing or do less of. And so thinking about that, and thinking about what you saw today, it's a question that I've asked you all before. There's 3 questions, actually. It's kind of an open-ended question. Feel free to use the chat. What now? Like, what do you need to get ready to do this? What else and what next? So any data that you need, one of the things that Matt said in the value add activity was, on data in a timely manner, right? And so if there's specific data that's coming to mind for you right now that you're curious or interested in having or needing to do this work, don't just ask us about random data, like stuff that you think will really help you engage in this work. Put it in the chat. If you have a question about what has been shared or something that is coming, put it in the chat. Any ahas or assumptions. So we're going to take about 5 minutes for you just to flood the chat with your reflections, revelations, and needs as we prepare to engage in the work as an SBAC this year.
So Dan had a question.
Oh, sorry, Dan. Wait a minute. Now the chat's going to be flooded. Can you get Dan's question real fast? Dan, do you mind unmuting and asking it? I'm sorry, because that's going to be hard for me to catch it with the chat.
Yeah,
going.
just do you have an initial guesstimate as to the magnitude of cuts that you're anticipating this year at this point?
Pauline, do we have a guesstimate? Well, we know we got to do that.
We know the 2.2 is definitely the ones that we kick the can down the road, but we're working on it, Dan. We're coming up looking at things that we need to account for. So the short answer is no, but we know it's in excess of 2.2.
And a part of us meeting early is that we know we need to get that target we need to get clear on that target and get that target to you all early so that we can start doing the work. So don't worry that we're not going to, mention the target until January. That's not the case. We anticipate perhaps even in our next meeting together, we'll be clearer on that target and can engage you all in it as an SBAC.
And Matt had a question about variance reports.
Go ahead, Matt. Keep flooding the chat, you all, with your
That was my
what
question. It was the ask was to say what you would like to see in the future. So that's just me recording that.
Okay. Take a few more minutes for folks to put in what they would like to see or the information they need. I know one thing that's come up for us is you heard Pauline talk about the additional hours and things like that. We are going to do some kind of report or analysis on what are these additional, these add-ons is what we're calling them. What are they and what are they for and how much are they? And so that's, for at least for our team, some information that we think is really important to gather. Not to stop, but just to really get a clear sense of the work that people are doing and the extra pay that we're paying them to do it, which would definitely inform some other conversations as well. So that's one piece of data that we ourselves are trying to better understand. Because like Pauline said, it was like a surprise. We were pretty shocked. The other thing that we're doing as we talk about our general ed budget, and I think one of the things that was highlighted in tonight's recap was just the increase of spending in special education. And so we're putting in place some additional checks and balances and some systems to allow us to really monitor that in real time, so that we know SPED is very variable, just to be real, variable everywhere and costly everywhere. And we want to make sure that we are not getting to the end of the year and then like, whoa, we have this, these increased price tags to the tune of $1 million, et cetera. So one of the things that we're trying to better understand in terms of systems is how do we monitor it better? And that is some data that we also are collecting. So we are truly a data informed community and definitely engage in continuous improvement and always asking questions. And so again, encourage you to ask questions as well, even if we don't have the answer. Interesting, Vicki. Okay. We're going to take about a minute more to get your thoughts and your ideas. And then we are going to wrap up this orientation kickoff meeting. I want to confirm calendar too. So I do want to point out that this deck is in the chat, but it will also be posted for your access. We have calendared meetings through the end of the calendar year. Remember that at the beginning of January, beginning of 2025, there's a change in board leadership. And at that change, the board then identifies their dates for their board meetings for that calendar year, and they vote on it. And so at this point, we don't know. There's been a typical cadence of when board meetings happen, but we don't take that for granted because of holidays and personal reasons, et cetera. And so what we do know is that we have our board meetings scheduled through the end of 2024. And what we have been doing as an SBAC is meeting on those off Wednesdays. And so the dates that we're proposing for our next 3 meetings this year is October 16th. Same time, 4 to 5:30, then November 13th, and then December 11th. And then we would come back with we would then as a team come back and figure out, the new dates for 2025 once the board meeting calendar dates are confirmed. Rebecca?
GShack is on the 16th, right?
I know that now. We'll work on that. Well, that's not until 6 though, no?
Let's see. Oh, right. Oh, never mind. That's a long one. That's a long one. Okay,
Rebecca, we got to eat our Wheaties. Yes. And thank you for doing that. So we do want everybody to check those dates because you might have another committee meeting because all of you all by default are on this committee because you're on another advisory committee. So please cross-check those dates. And please let us know if there's anyone who has issue with the 3 dates that are here. This is kind of keeping that same kind of cadence that we had last year. The The other thing we want to do is to remind you that every committee, this SBAC has membership from most every advisory committee. If you are here because you were here last year, but you're not sure if you're representing your committee, please make sure to go back to your committee. GSHAC was the example that Rebecca just said, and make sure that they know that you are still their rep, or that you ask who will be the rep for the 24-25 budgeting year for SBAC. Because we want to make sure we have representation from all of our advisory committees as well as all of our labor partners. I want to make sure that you all know that we do compile all of our SBAC resources into a shared folder, and that folder is in the appendix. That not only has the presentations, but it also has data that you might request, etc. And I want to make sure that you know that we will be asking for feedback, but if you want to see the feedback from last year, it's there linked as well. One thing that we're working on this year is thinking about how we can answer all your questions and get you the information that you're asking for without taking up all the meeting time to discuss it, right? And so all the questions have always been really helpful and informative. But what we did last year is we try to sometimes answer them in real time or go over the data, and we will still make time to do that. But there's so much information that folks ask for. So we're going to figure out a way to compile kind of questions, but also, put the answer where maybe you can just go look and click the link and see the data. So I'll be asking you all next time probably for some ideas of how we might do that. We only meet together for an hour and a half. And even if we extend the time to 2 hours or 3 hours, there's never enough time to answer everyone's questions or go over every piece of data. And so we are going to be looking for some feedback of how we can move the work along, still making sure everyone has information that they need in a way that makes sense and is efficient and effective. So just kind of let that percolate in your brains. And if you have ideas, email me. Don't say them now. Just email me. But we're thinking about some type of shared Google Sheet or some shared Excel doc or something where you could see the question and then staff can put the answer in or put the data in or whatever. And we might not go over it at the meeting, but the entire GSHAC will have access to that and can look at the information at their leisure. So look at that, 5:12. Don't get used to this, y'all. When we start having those hard conversations, we will keep you to 5:30 and beyond. But that is the end of our content for this evening. If there are no more questions, again, want to extend it. His left. Wow, Matt just left. You see that? He just left, y'all. We're gonna talk. Don't you worry about. I thought he had a question. I was like, oh, he has a question. Anyway, just thank you for coming back, because it's hard work that we do. And if I were you, I might not have come back because we're about to make some really serious decisions now. But looking forward to working with you all, and we will see you back here at our next meeting on October 16th. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, wait, here's some cool things you can do with Google Meet.
Oh,
Goodbye,
God.
everyone.
I forgot.
With the horns.
I saw a t-shirt. I saw a sweatshirt at Target. It said, say hello to my cat. And I thought about you.
Oh, yeah?
Nicole, you're going to teach the Google Meets workshop.
Oh, no, I'm telling you. Here, if I take off my background.
Because we're still trying to figure out some of the things.
Yeah, it was funny. At some point during the meeting, Rebecca made a heart go across the screen. And Nicole, you know how easily distracted I am. And I was like, what's that? And so I was like, we may have to make a protocol for when you are allowed to use all those little features. So anyway.
I'm telling you.
It did it.
Nice. Nice.
You can do heart, you can do.
Those of us who have focus issues, not have
hearts. Well, that's a lot of hearts. I don't know how to do that.
And Pauline just as bad. I am getting off this call. You all have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Come on.
Bye. I can't do.
I can't remember.
Bye, y'all.
All right. Bye, Nicole. Talk to you later. Bye.
Go home. Like Tracy Chapman said, go home. Sam.
Did you present in Zoom or did you present off of Zoom?
You have to open it up in presentation mode before you present.
But you don't click it in the presentation. You click it on in the
Before you open it up to share, you have to have it in presentation mode.
But then we share it we didn't remove.
How do I end this? Zoom? Oh, I don't even want to think about Zoom anymore. After that was horrible. That's just like when you came in that day. I was worried. I was so frustrated with Zoom because it wasn't letting me. It kept telling me. I kept getting these error messages, and it kept saying.
What do you mean for
this meeting? Oh. Oh yeah, I'm not gonna wait till the last minute. That would have been a disaster.